Shall we start?
Yep.
Okay. All right. I've been assigned to be the welcomer this evening, and I want to happily.
And this is
I want to happily welcome all of you who joined us for this gathering this evening.
Do you want me to make a test?
Before you start, everybody. I think you should mute everybody.
Yeah, mute
Everyone
everybody.
mute yourself.
Oh, I guess you have to mute if you want to hear me.
Mom, I'm gonna mute everyone and then you unmute yourself, okay?
Okay. Okay, I want to say again how happy we are to welcome all of you to this event. It's a very special event. I want first to begin by thanking the head of the Harvard Square Business Association, Denise Gilman. She came to us to offer us the outdoor space that is at the end of Brattle Street. I call it Brattle Street Square, to hold the event. And we were very excited and very grateful for her offer. And we knew how special the location was, because in addition, there had been an evening gathering to honor Brother Blue and Ruth Hill. And after that, later, there was an evening to honor Elsa Dorfman, the photographer, and her memory and her wonderful photograph. Those were very wonderful community activities. And we have Denise to thank for that. But the threat of coronavirus and the variants made some feel it was best to hold this reading virtually. So here we are tonight. So James quickly notified people on email of the change, and other friends were called. And I want to express a special gratitude to James and William for adapting to this adjustment. As a family, we always gathered in Vermont on August the 24th for Ifeanyi's birthday. We gathered at a farm he had provided for us, in which he named Elora Farm, which in Igbo means a gathering place, where friends and family have gathered for many years. I realized that the Brattle Street location was a gathering place. It was an Elora. And then I suddenly realized that Zoom too could be a gathering place and Elora. So welcome tonight to Elora. Tonight we welcome the distinguished moderator, Lloyd Schwartz, distinguished in so many ways, but among them as the Poet Laureate of Somerville. Ifeanyi lived almost 40 years of his life in Somerville, and he died at our home in Somerville. We are also privileged and honored to have three wonderful poets with us tonight: Robert Pinsky, Gail Mazur, and Peter Balakian, whom Lloyd has the honor of introducing later. I would also like to acknowledge the many other poets whom loved Ifeanyi and supported him and the store for many years, and for whom he loved very much. In fact, I got a telephone call of wishes from David Ferry tonight. Also present tonight are our four children, and they come from many locations: Washington, D.C., Brooklyn, New York, and Necca's here with me from Somerville. And you will notice a smattering of our grandchildren too, who are on the Zoom with us. And Ifeanyi was a devoted professor of philosophy, a devoted father and grandfather and husband, and he deeply believed that poetry could bring the peoples of the world together, a gigantic Elora. You will notice in the corner of over here, I guess it is, there are people inside the Grolier bookshop. Among them is Elizabeth. I don't know who else. I think James is there, but I know that there is a group of students from BU who have been chosen to be in the BU Creative Writing Program, and that's a very honored selection. And that is actually taught by Robert Pinsky. I suggest to you, finally, that if you have a chance to go to the Grolier Poetry Bookshop and meet our manager, James, you will find that he's a very wonderful, young, and friendly man, and that he loves poetry and knows the Grolier and knows where every book in the store is located. So finally, I give a hearty welcome and thank you for all of you who have come tonight to share this gathering place. Thank you. Lloyd, I think it's your turn.
Yes. Thank you, Carol, and welcome everyone. Ifeanyi Menkiti was a true hero, both as a gifted and delectable poet. What pleasure he takes in stimulating all our taste buds. And as the owner and rescuer of the Grolier Poetry Bookshop. Of course, we also know him as a distinguished philosopher, and underlying all his poetry is a deep thoughtfulness and spirituality, and a devotion to poetry's cultural universality. One of the highlights of the poetry readings at the Grolier were the thoughtful responses by Ifeanyi to the poems that were read. Those of us who loved him miss him inestimably, but we still have his poems, and soon, with his new book coming to America, more of them than ever. And before I introduce our official readers tonight, I just want to read my own particular favorite of Ifeanyi's poems. It's a short poem called Fish Heads. Big head of a fish, wet eyes cooking in the pot. Oh, I love fish heads when they simmer. And English folks cannot understand why Indians and Africans love fish heads. Eh? In London, the landlady got so mad at them, she threw them out of the building for cooking fish heads all the time and messing up the hallways with fish smell. And we have considered the lilies and how they grow, fed by God's abundant mercy. But the lilies eat manure, and a diet of manure is not nearly as good as a diet of fish heads. So let the English eat manure like the lilies in their Bible. As for us, fish heads when they simmer. Now, it's my pleasure to introduce Denise Allson, Executive Director of the Harvard Square Business Association and a great friend of the Groliers. Denise?
Good evening. It's such an honor to be here tonight. And I have to tell you, I am outside because we tend to hold all of our events in Harvard Square, many of them anyway, outside and in the public way. And I'm sitting here in my yard on Mass Avenue, and many times Menkiti would walk by and we would have these wonderful conversations under the tree here in my yard. So I'm hoping that the traffic is going to respect our little interlude this evening. So first of all, I would like to formally welcome everybody here on behalf of the Harvard Square Business Association. Menkiti was a dear friend of ours, a longtime member of the association. And, Carol and the children have taken on this legacy, and we're just so delighted that the Grolier lives on. My personal connection to Menkiti goes back probably some 35 or 40 years ago when I first met him, when we were property rights activists and affordable housing advocates. So we have this long storied history, he and I, and would, frequently talk politics and just, the business of the business district. So this evening, I am so pleased and honored to read to you an official proclamation from Mayor Sumbul Siddiqui, and it reads, whereas Ifeanyi Menkiti was a Nigerian poet, philosopher, professor, and owner of the Grolier Poetry Bookstore, and whereas Ifeanyi Menkiti has written several collections of poetry, such as Before the Soil in 2007, Off Altair, The Bright Light in 2005, Affirmations in 1971, and The Jubilation of the Falling Bodies in 1978. Receiving his PhD in philosophy from Harvard University, he taught philosophy at Wellesley College. And whereas Menkiti became the owner of Grolier Poetry Bookshop in 2006, preventing the shop from its closure. The Grolier Poetry Bookshop has become a prominent space in facilitating and promoting the works of poets and expanding interest in poetry to a larger audience. And whereas the city of Cambridge is truly thankful for Ifeanyi Menkiti's great contribution and commitment to poetry, philosophy, and the Grolier Poetry Bookshop. We would also like to highlight the efforts and impact of his life in the Grolier Poetry Bookshop as a prime example of the importance of Black and Brown businesses within our community. Now, therefore, in recognition of his outstanding contribution to world of philosophy and poetry, I, Sumbul Siddiqui, Mayor of the City of Cambridge, proclaim August 24th, 2021, Ifeanyi Menkiti Day.
Oh my
Thank
God.
you very much.
Okay, what?
And we have a formal proclamation that will be delivered to the bookshop tomorrow. And the mayor was sincerely sorry that she could not be here this evening to read this herself.
Thank you. That's great news. And well deserved. Our three readers this evening are all extraordinary award-winning poets and longtime friends of the Grolier. I'll introduce each of them separately. Our first reader is Peter Balakian, who teaches at Colgate University. He's the author of 7 books of poetry, the most recent of which, Ozone Journal, was awarded the 2016 Pulitzer Prize for Poetry. His new book, No Sign, will be out next spring. Among his 4 books of prose, Black Dog of Fate won the Penn Allbrand Award for memoir, and The Burning Tigress was a Times notable book. Peter is a chronicler of the Armenian genocide, and he's the writer you most want to read on that subject in any genre. Before the pandemic, Peter gave a memorable reading for the Grolier at the Commander Hotel in Cambridge. Peter.
Lloyd, thank you. And yeah, it's nice to think of those days before the pandemic, but it's great to be here, even from my own living room with all of you tonight. Are you hearing me well? Sound coming through? Good. And James at the Grolier and everyone at the Grolier And Carol and all the Menkiti family, thank you for everything that the Grolier embodies now in its new phase. Ifeanyi was a special man. His generosity, his humanity, his powerful language, his voice. I hear his voice in my head whenever I think of him. Poet, philosopher, scholar, and cultural entrepreneur. And Lloyd, with you, I enjoyed greatly being on the board, as we were at that time, for the Grolier. And I guess all of us here and many others feel we need to see the Grolier go to the next place. Many of us around the nation are indebted to it. It is the greatest poetry bookstore in the nation. So let me read a few poems. I'll read one of mine in some way just to mark good things hanging from the vine in late summer. Late summer, Ifeanyi's birth time, although on another continent, this poem is set on this continent. And it is a poem that'll be in my new book. It's called Eggplant. I think it goes actually with fish heads. I love the white moon circles and the purple halos on a plate as the salt sweat them. The oil in the pan smoked like bad days in the Syrian desert, when a moon stayed all day, when morning was a purple elegy for the last friend seen, when the fog of the riverbank rose like a holy ghost. My mother made those white moons sizzle in some egg wash and salt. Some parsley appeared from the garden, and summer evenings came with no memory, but the table with white dishes. Shining aubergine, black-skinned beauty, bitter apple, we used our hands. I'd like to read a few poems from Ifeanyi's upcoming book, Coming to America. It's a beautiful book, many layers in this book. I'm going to read 3 short poems, and they give you some sense, as you know, if you know Ifeanyi's work, of his wit, his playfulness, and his deadly serious irony. This is called This One for China. This chicken belongs to General So. This other one to General Gao. The 3 delights are from Hunan Kitchen. Ma Pu is as Ma Pu does, which is quite different from the way that Pu Pu does. Call me when you get to Beijing, and I will tell you the rest of this poem. Title of this poem, Semper Aliquid, from the larger Latin phrase. And here, Ifeanyi left out the larger Latin phrase, but the reader will get it. Ex Africa semper aliquid novi. Out of Africa, always something new. So riffing on that phrase, this poem goes. Let us say you are in a restaurant and you are halfway through your hamburger plate. And then the remaining half of the hamburger decides to walk off the plate. Take a stroll through the neighborhood. Wouldn't you think to yourself that the end of the world was coming? But of course, if you happen to be in Africa, where strange things happen all the time, and the people are not at all surprised at the sight of hamburgers which walk, then it would not startle you one bit. Remember that semper aliquid novi and the ex Africa, which always goes before it. Rising wind. And we will make ourselves a clan, maybe a tribe. out of our several affections, and our clan will be called the Clan of Good Hope. Stanley, in a rising wind, the clustered dust of all his friends who fell or did not fall along the way, and still the hope of poetry persists. And Okibu, dead at Opie Junction, and Jeffrey Hill gone back to England now, and Tarn Nathaniel out there in New Mexico someplace. These were the friends, these the guardians, who knew that something good was happening in Africa back then. The arrows of God, have they not trembled at the gates of light? And the secret thing in its heaving, who can explain where it has come to its rest? Earth receives her own when all of this is finished. Lloyd, pass the torch to the next.
Well, I thought you were going to read some more.
That's just where I want to end.
Okay. I meant to hold up a copy of Ozone Journal with its beautiful Franz Klein cover, and thank you. Our next reader is Robert Pinsky, who is the director of the MFA program in creative writing at Boston University and the author of 9 collections of poems, most recently at the Foundling Hospital, and 7 books of critical and creative prose. He's also an editor, opera librettist, saxophonist, prize-winning translator, most famously of Dante's Inferno, and he was, for an unprecedented 3 terms, the Poet Laureate of the United States. Maybe you've heard Lisa Simpson read his poem Impossible to Tell on the episode of The Simpsons in which Robert was a guest star. A couple of years ago, he gave a reading at the Cambridge Historical Society from his remarkable book-length poem, An Explanation of America, which was sponsored by the Grolier. Robert?
You're on mute, Robert. Thank you. It is a sad pleasure and an honor to be here in the presence of Ifeanyi. I met Ifeanyi when we were 2 very young poets teaching at the same college. It was immediately clear that he was a man of community, of civic presences. He was interested in every group, in every culture. As a philosopher and as a poet, he was entirely somebody who was valuable to others and to communities. I'm going to read from the very beginning of this wonderful new book that'll be out, I think, in October, Coming to America. When this is done, Part 1. And the young become old, and old become elders, and elders become spirits. And spirits, what can be said of them? That those who have traveled to a far country, the far country returns them, but only after they're done to journey, therefore, from that place on to the Great Pyramid of Saqqara, riding the late express to Brooklyn, the philosopher, how he ends up where he began, and the poet, something he thought might yet bring back that hour of splendor in the grassy field that neither Wordsworth nor Okigbo saw the need to reveal. The secret of this mystery: the young, they will become old, and the old will become elders, and the elders, spirithood awaits them when this is all done. 2, and that our God not fail us, a prayer said at morning light, but also at evening time. A rose claims a name for itself. The rose does not belong to Umberto alone. We, who were not invited to the feast, yet we came to the table anyway. Jerusalem was builded there. I'm going to read another poem that, in a way, is part of Ifeanyi's tremendous interest in imperialism of all kinds, including American, but also his interest in funny little bits of quiddity, this and that. This is Ifeanyi Menkiti's poem, NFL. NFL. So many Igbo boys playing for the National Football League. Soon they will want to rename it the Nigerian Football League, and not the national anymore. And one of them is named Iyedigbo, and another named Iyeletu, and not to mention Osi and Nnamdi, the ones that earn the big bucks. Why do these Igbo boys, who do they think they are? To knock heads together each Sunday afternoon, to wrestle down the opposition without fear. They should be home breaking bones for Biafra. But Mr. Goodell, he could not then guarantee them their pension when they retired. I have quoted Ifeanyi Menkiti twice in my poems, and I'll read about 10 lines where that happens. In my poem, I'll read 6 lines from my poem, Sayings of the Old. The Igbos say, an old man sitting down can see more things than a young man standing up. But sooner or later, the mule kicks all alike, the young, the old, the stalks of crops and weeds falling and rising like years. The brain roof chatter settling among the eaves, all falling and rising and falling again, the calm brute rhythm of hooves. And I'll close with a recent poem of, I think it's 8 lines long. It's a poem that came from reading an essay by Ifeanyi. And the essay was entirely about this same idea of community and of civic sensibility. So I will end my contribution with this poem, Country Music. Country Music. Ifeanyi says, in his country, a baby is it until it learns to be one of us. I am in my Igbo's second infancy. The quarrel, a coral, a glacier, my lungs, the weather, the world, the book review, lyrical bitching, biblical plaint, infant debt of attention, again and again vetting the news, the noise, the needs for keeps. It is the beginning and it is the ending, and having the heart to tell them apart.
Thank you, Robert. Thank you so much. Our last reader this evening is poet and anti-war activist and great citizen of Cambridge, Gail Mazur, who is the author of 8 books of poetry, most recently Land's End, New and Selected Poems. She received the National I'm sorry, she received the Massachusetts Book Award for Zeppo's First Wife and grants from the National Endowment for the Arts and the Radcliffe Institute. She's the founding director of another Harvard Square institution, the Blacksmith House Poetry Series, and was the guest editor of 2 issues of Plowshares. She teaches at the Fine Arts Work Center and has been the distinguished writer in residence at Boston University, Emerson College, and the University of Houston. Gail?
I'll find her.
Gail, are you there?
Gail, unmute yourself.
Unmute.
Is that, am I loud now?
You are now. You're audible now.
Okay. But not loud. Thank you. And thank you for including me in this amazing, sweet, beautiful evening in honor of our friend Ifeanyi. I'm going to read 2 short poems of his that are quite wry. None of us consulted with one another to know what each of us were reading, and we haven't repeated. But one of the things I always felt about seeing him, which was always a joy, was the robustness of his pleasure in meeting one, but also just his pleasure in life, in poetry, in the world seemed funny to him with all that he knew of it. So these poems are sort of impish. This one is called The Way It Goes. The son of a tribal chief, now turned cat comforter for the local SPCA. How does he explain his job to the folks back home? How dare he explain? The world's economy is getting brighter. They said those who were chiefs and did nothing are now doing something which is equally nothing. There was such richness in Ifeanyi's gifts, and he was so present that I feel like he's present right now with us, and I hope he's enjoying us. Strangers. Do not talk to immigrant strangers after dark. Immigrant strangers will kidnap you if you do. You will want to be able to see their faces so you can report them to the police. Immigrant strangers will steal your roast beef if you invite them into your home, your silverware as well. If you do not watch them, they will steal your toothbrush too. Immigrant strangers are problematic, whichever way you look at them. Only God can protect us from them. Or if not God, then the nationalistic party of God with really big rifles ready to go. And I was asked to read something of my own. And I'm going to read a poem that I wrote called To the Makers. If it's where I think it is in my book.
There she is.
Mm-hmm. Okay. You were like famous cities with rivers and traffic, with architecture from ingenious eras, with protest marches and festivals, museums and pharmacies, and criminal pleasures. All the essentials needed to endure. Reading you, I revisit your structures of grids and avenues, your alleys. I follow overgrown paths. I revisit the terror and joy of being lost, the ways to court discomfort, to dare chaos, the knowledge of drowning in a pitch dark harbor. Tyranny and wars advanced in your histories. Also infirmities of soul and body were your portion. Yet you were not yearning only, not heartbreak only. You were not the loneliest people alive. It was your work and then you had one another. You spoke with gods and heroes. You cherished your conversations in many languages. It is true, you were secretive, observers, spies. But that was as it has to be. It was only your work you were given to serve. You weren't mere investigators of useless things. The pragmatics seemed no more or less suggestive to you than articles of turbulence or rapture. Strands of hair in a basin, light in a dusty stairwell, a pitcher of sangria, woe and laughter, the feel in the hand of a broken thing. Day by day, your lives were a tumult of beginnings. When you began, you couldn't know. This you keep showing me, where your constructions would lead. What you made from the inchoate, muscled and shaped, not toward the monumental, but toward a form of truth that could matter. The inaccessible become necessary. Though I am speaking to you, I'm not alone, nurtured by your art. Even today, you animate the minutiae of a vast, unsigned cosmos. And though the 20th century ended without you, now decades after your precipitate departures, your pages are still touched by many, still touch many, and the lit screens you never used sing your lines. For Ifeanyi.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I have to say, this is one of the few poetry readings I wish had been longer. So before signing off, I'd like to thank our really wonderful readers and the great selection of poems you read tonight, both by Ifeanyi and your own. I'd like to thank the Harvard Square Business Association, especially Denise Gilson, Executive Director, and William Manley, Director of Marketing and Events. Cambridge Mayor Sumbul Siddiqui, and the people who keep the Grolier going, Elizabeth Duran, Celia Muto, and especially James Fraser for really putting this event together, and the whole Menkiti family for the way they honor their beloved Ifeanyi and for their devotion to his dream of keeping the Grolier Poetry Bookshop alive and the flourishing landmark it deserves to remain. Thank you very, 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 very much.
Thank you.
Good night.
Good night.
Thank you all.
Thank you. It was beautiful.
Thank you very much, guys. It's amazing.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Carol.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Bye.
Carol.
Bye. Thank you, everybody.
Bye.
Good night.
Love you.
wonderful.
Denise.
Night.
Thank you.
Hi, Peter.
Oh, the baby Dee Dee.
Oh, let me
Thank
see.
you.
Oh,
Thank you.
Oh,
Ah.
look at Josie. Look at Josie. Oh,
Lovely.
Hi, Rosie. Good night.
Bye. There's pre-order. It's the
And
chart.
these ones want to say hi too.
Oh, wait, go back.
That's Eden.
Oh, look at them. Hi, girls.
Hi,
Do you say
Hi,
hi, Lee?
hi, Ella. Hi, Eden.
Hi. Baby Ella is so big.
Oh, there's
I know.
Yes.
Richard.
Hi, everyone.
Hi.
Oh,
Hey.
All righty. Good night. Bye. Good night,
Bye.
Paul.
Good
Bye,
night.
Gordon.
Good night,
Bye-bye.
everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
What a great
Thank
tribute.
you.
Great tribute.
Thank you, Grolier.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Carol and James and everyone.
We'll meet in the Grolier soon,
Yes.
You
Yes.
said it, Peter.
soon.
Good night.
Thank you so
Good
much.
Thanks, guys.
Night, everyone.
Hate to see you. Thanks.
Good night, everyone.
Lisa.